The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that familiar corporate glow that made everything look slightly unreal after 9 p.m. I rubbed my eyes and stared at the campaign proposal on my screen, the words blurring together like alphabet. Soup. 3 weeks into this project, I still felt like I was throwing darts in the dark. Henderson Associates Marketing Solutions. Even the company name felt too big for me sometimes. Fresh out of college, living in a city where I knew exactly 2 people, one being my landlord, I was determined to prove I belonged here. Even if it meant staying until my eyes burned and my back ached from this cheap office chair, the cursor blinked mockingly at me. Innovative strategies for modern consumer engagement. What did that even mean? I'd written and rewritten the same paragraph 6 times, and it still sounded like corporate word vomit. I was considering giving up for the night when I heard the soft click of heels against polished concrete. The office had that open concept design that made privacy impossible. So I looked up from my cubicle to see Elena Vasquez walking purposefully toward her corner office. Elena. Even thinking her name made something flutter in my chest that tried very hard to ignore. She paused when she noticed the light at my workstation, her dark eyes scanning the otherwise empty floor. Maya, what are you still doing here? Her voice carried that hint of an accent that made even the most mundane question sound musical. I'd heard her on client calls. She could sell snow to someone living in Antarctica with that voice. Just trying to crack this Henderson campaign. Proposal, I said, attempting to sound casual rather than completely defeated. The creative brief is ... challenging. Elena's expression softened, and she changed direction, walking over to my desk. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse. The kind of effortless professional elegance I hope to achieve someday. Even after a full day at the office, she looked composed, put together. I was acutely aware of my wrinkled cardigan and the coffee stain on my sleeve. May I? She asked, gesturing toward my screen. I nodded, trying not to notice how her perfume, something subtle and expensive, filled the space around my cubicle as she leaned over my shoulder to read. Her proximity made it hard to focus on anything, except the warmth radiating from her skin and the way her long, dark hair fell like a curtain beside my face. She murmured, her finger tracing along the lines of text. You're overthinking this. Henderson wants innovation, but what they really want is to feel smart for choosing us. Sometimes the most innovative thing you can do is simplify. She reached across me to grab a pen from my desk, her arm brushing against mine for just a moment. The contact was so brief, it might have been accidental, but it sent an unexpected jolt through me. Mind if I? She gestured toward a blank piece of paper. Please, I said, probably too eagerly. She sketched out a rough concept, bold, clean, completely different from the overcomplicated mess I'd been creating. As she drew, she explained her thinking, her voice animated in a way I rarely heard during our formal team meetings. See? You're trying to say everything at once, she said, glancing at me with those dark eyes that seemed to see right through my professional facade. But the best campaigns whisper, Maya. They make people lean in to listen. The way she said my name made something warm unfold in my chest. In team meetings, I was just another junior coordinator. But sitting here in the quiet office, with Elena's full attention focused on me, I felt like I mattered, like my ideas mattered. I think I was trying too hard to sound. Experienced, I admitted, like I belonged here. Elena set down the pen and turned to face me fully. You do belong here, Maya. You have a natural instinct for this work. But more than that, you bring something fresh to our team. Don't try to sound like everyone else. We already have everyone else. She paused, studying my face with an intensity that made me feel exposed. You have such a fresh perspective. Don't lose that trying to fit in. The compliment hit differently than the usual professional praise. Felt personal, intimate even. I found myself holding her gaze longer than was probably appropriate. Searching for something I couldn't name in her expression. Thank you, I said quietly. That ... means a lot coming from you. Coffee? She asked suddenly, breaking the moment. I was going to make some anyway, and you look like you could use the caffeine. I nodded, grateful for the excuse to spend more time with her, even if it was just sharing coffee in an empty office. Alina disappeared into the break room, and I tried to use the few minutes alone to compose myself. This was my boss, my successful, sophisticated, completely out of my league boss. Whatever I was feeling, admiration, a crush, traction, it was inappropriate and needed to stay locked away. She returned with 2 steaming mugs, setting one beside my keyboard before perching on the edge of my desk. The casual intimacy of the gesture made my pulse quicken. "So tell me about your career ambitions," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "What does Maya Chen want to accomplish in the next 5 years?" We talked for over an hour. About marketing strategies and creative campaigns, but also about books and travel and the challenges of starting over in a new city. Lena was an attentive listener, asking thoughtful questions that made me feel heard in a way I hadn't experienced since college. "I moved here right after my divorce was finalized," she said at one point, her voice taking on a softer quality. "Sometimes I think I threw myself into work because it was easier than dealing with everything else." The admission felt like a gift, this successful, composed woman trusting me with something personal and vulnerable. I wanted to ask more, to understand what had happened, but something in her expression warned me not to push. "And be lonely," I said instead. "But they're also full of possibilities." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Exactly. Fresh starts, new perspectives." She paused, looking at me with something that felt like approval. "I think you're going to do very well here, Maya." When she finally left to collect her forgotten files, I sat in the quiet office, feeling energized despite the late hour. Rough sketch still lay on my desk, and I found myself tracing the bold lines with my finger, remembering the warmth of her presence beside me. After that night, something shifted. Alina began stopping by my cubicle more frequently sometimes, with work-related questions, but increasingly just to check in. She'd ask about my weekend plans, or recommend a restaurant she thought I'd enjoy. The attention felt special, chosen. "You're really finding your rhythm," she said one Tuesday morning, reviewing a client presentation I'd drafted. But then she added, "You have such a natural instinct for reading people, Maya. It's rare." The praise felt different from her usual professional feedback, more personal, more intimate. I found myself staying late more often, hoping she'd return to the office, like that first night. Sometimes she did, and we'd share coffee and conversation that stretched well beyond work topics. "Alina really seems to have taken you under her wing," Jason Kumar observed one afternoon. He was sorting through client files at the desk next to mine, his cheerful demeanor making him impossible to dislike. Jason had started at the company the same week I did, and we'd quickly bonded over being the new kids. "She's been a great mentor," I said carefully. "More like a work mom," Jason grinned. "Very protective work mom. Did you see how she shut down Marcus when he criticized your Henderson presentation? I thought she was going to throw him out the window." I had noticed Elena's fierce defense of my work during that team meeting, how her usual diplomatic tone had turned sharp when Marcus questioned my research methodology. At the time, I'd been grateful, but hadn't thought much of it. Now, Jason's observation made me wonder if there was more to Elena's protectiveness than simple mentorship. "She believes in supporting junior staff," I said, but even as I spoke the words, they felt insufficient to explain the intensity of Elena's attention. "Hung," Jason said, not sounding entirely convinced. "Well, whatever it is, you're lucky. Elena's approval around here is like gold." That afternoon, Elena stopped by. My desk with a coffee, my usual order from the cafe downstairs, perfectly prepared without me having asked for it. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting the cup beside my keyboard. Her fingers brushed mine as she handed it over, and I felt that familiar flutter of awareness. "Thank you," I said, wondering when she'd memorized my coffee preferences. "You didn't have to, ... "I wanted to," she interrupted, her voice warm. "You've been working so hard lately. Appreciate your dedication, Maya." Again, the way she said my name felt charged with meaning I couldn't quite decipher. I found myself looking forward to these small interactions more than I cared to admit. The highlight of my day became Elena's visits to my cubicle, our brief conversations that felt laden with subtext I was afraid to examine too closely. But late at night, Alone in my small apartment, I couldn't deny what was happening. My admiration for Alina was evolving into something deeper, more complicated. I respected her professional expertise, but I also found myself noticing the graceful way she moved through the office, how her laugh sounded during client calls, the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. It was inappropriate. It was unprofessional. It was a crush on my boss that could complicate everything I'd worked for. And despite all my rational arguments against it, the feeling was growing stronger every day. Friday evening found our entire team at Meridian, the upscale bar where the company traditionally held informal networking events. The atmosphere was relaxed, professional boundaries softened by expensive cocktails and low lighting. I nursed a glass of wine, trying to look comfortable in a social setting where I still felt like an outsider. Alina held court near the bar, discussing industry trends with senior staff members. She was wearing a black dress that managed to be both professional and elegant, and I caught myself watching her more than I should have. When she laughed at something Marcus said, the same. Marcus, who'd criticized my presentation earlier that week, I felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been jealousy. "You okay?" Jason appeared at my elbow with a beer in hand. "You look like you're plotting someone's demise." "Just thinking about the Morrison project," I lied. "On a Friday night? Maya, you need to learn to disconnect." He grinned and clinked his bottle against my wine glass. "Come on, let's go save Alina from Marcus's mansplaining about digital marketing trends." But before we could move, other colleagues began drifting away, some heading home to families, others moving on to dinner plans. Within an hour, the crowd had thinned significantly. Jason left with a group planning to try the new Korean barbecue place downtown, and gradually, inevitably, it was just Alina and me occupying a quiet corner booth. "Well," she said, settling back against the leather banquette, "that's the first time I've seen Marcus actually listen to someone else's opinion about social media analytics." "You were very diplomatic," I said. I would have told him he was completely wrong about Gen Z engagement patterns. Alina laughed, a real laugh that transformed her entire face. "You would have been right, too." Sometimes I forget that being diplomatic isn't always the same as being honest. She signaled the bartender for another round, and I realized we were settling in for a longer conversation. The bar had grown quieter, more intimate, with soft jazz playing in the background and candles flickering on each table. "Can I ask you something?" Alina said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "Do you ever feel lost?" The question caught me off guard. "Lost how?" "Like you're following a script someone else wrote for your life, but you can't remember agreeing to the part." She stared into her wine glass, swirling the dark liquid thoughtfully. "I spent my 20s building my career, my 30s climbing the corporate ladder, getting married to someone who fit the plan perfectly on paper." She trailed off, and I waited, sensing she needed space to find her words. "And then one day I woke up and realized I didn't recognize my own life," she continued. "Perfect house, successful husband, impressive job title, and I felt completely empty inside." The vulnerability in her voice made my chest tight. This was Alina without her professional armor, raw and uncertain in a way I'd never seen before. "Is that why you got divorced?" I asked gently, among other reasons. She looked up at me then, her dark eyes reflecting the candlelight. "He wasn't a bad person. We were living parallel lives that never actually intersected, like roommates with a shared mortgage and social calendar." I wanted to reach across the table, to offer some gesture of comfort, but I didn't know if it would. "Be welcome. Starting over takes courage," I said instead. "Does it?" "Sometimes I think it just takes desperation." Alina's smile was rueful. "But talking to you, hearing your perspective on things, reminds me that there are still possibilities I haven't considered." The way she was looking at me made something flutter in my stomach. There was appreciation in her gaze, but also something deeper that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. "You give me hope, Maya," she said quietly. "Your enthusiasm for this work, your curiosity about everything, it's infectious. You make me remember why I fell in love with marketing in the first place." The words hung between us, charged with meaning that felt dangerously close to something neither of us should be acknowledging. My heart was beating faster, and I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. "I learned so much from you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've changed how I think about ... everything, really." Elena reached across the table then, her fingers covering mine where they rested beside my wine glass. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm, and I saw something shift in her expression: surprise, recognition, maybe fear. "Thank you," she said, her thumb brushing across my knuckles in a gesture that felt far too intimate for a work relationship. "For listening, for understanding." We sat like that for a moment, her hand warm against mine, both of us aware we'd crossed some invisible line, but neither willing to acknowledge it out loud. The bar continued to buzz with conversation around us, but our corner felt isolated, private, like we existed in our own bubble. Then Elena seemed to realize what she was doing. She pulled her hand back abruptly, reaching for her wine glass with movements that were too quick, too controlled. "I should go," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Early morning tomorrow." "Of course," I said, though my hand felt cold where hers had been. We gathered our things in awkward silence, the easy intimacy of moments before, replaced by uncertainty. As we walked to the parking garage, I could feel the weight of unspoken words between us. "Maya," Elena said as we reached my car, her voice uncertain, "tonight was ... I finished, when she seemed to struggle for words. "It was really nice." Nodded relief, and something else flickering across her face. Good night, Elena." I drove home through the quiet city streets, my hand still tingling from her touch, replaying every moment of our conversation. Something fundamental had shifted between us tonight, and I had no idea what it meant or where it might lead. But as I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment, I knew one thing for certain: whatever was happening between Elena and me was no longer something I could pretend didn't exist. Sunday evening. I was curled up on my couch with leftover Chinese takeout, half watching a Netflix series I'd already seen twice, when my phone buzzed. "Elena, did you get a chance to review the Morrison materials?" "No rush, just thinking ahead to tomorrow's meeting." A work text, perfectly normal. I typed back quickly, confirming I'd reviewed everything and offering a few thoughts on the presentation strategy. But instead of ending there, Elena responded with questions about my ideas. Somehow we found ourselves in a text conversation that stretched past midnight. "Elena, you mentioned loving contemporary fiction. Have you read anything by Hanya? Yana Jihara, me. A Little Life destroyed me emotionally, the best way. Elena, try to Paradise next. Though maybe save it for when you're feeling emotionally resilient, me. Are you always reading something that sounds intellectually intimidating? Elena, only when I'm trying to impress someone." That little winky face emoji made my heart skip in a way that was completely disproportionate to a simple text message. I stared at my phone, trying to decode the subtext. Was she flirting? Was I reading too much into digital communication? Me. Well, it's working. I hit send before I could overthink it, then immediately regretted being so bold. But Elena's response came quickly. "Elena, good to know. Sleep well, Maya." The texting became a regular thing. Elena would reach out about work, projects, but the conversations inevitably drifted into personal territory. She recommended books, asked about my weekend plans, shared observations about art exhibitions or restaurants she'd tried. I found myself checking my phone constantly, a flutter of excitement every time I saw her name on my screen. "Elena, lazy Sunday reading in the park. What's your ideal Sunday?" "Me, honestly. Exploring the city. I still feel like a tourist here sometimes, Elena. Good tourists ask lots of questions and notice things others miss. So those are valuable qualities." "Me. Is that your way of calling me nosy, Elena?" "It's my way of calling you curious." "There's a difference." I screenshotted that exchange and stared at it longer than I cared to admit. The way Elena saw me as curious rather than nosy, enthusiastic rather than naive, made me feel like a better version of myself, like someone worth knowing. 3 weeks into our regular texting, I had to acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding. I looked forward to Elena's messages more than anything else in my day, more than coffee with Jason, more than weekend plans with college friends who visited the city, more than the validation of a successful client presentation. This wasn't typical. Boss-employee communication. I knew that. But every time I considered pulling back, creating more professional distance, Alina would send something that drew me back in. Alina saw this in a bookstore window. Thought of you. The attached photo showed a display of debut. Novels by young authors, with a handwritten sign reading fresh voices, bold perspectives. The fact that Alina had seen something random and thought of me, taken the time to photograph it and send it, made my chest warm with something dangerously close to affection. Me, you're going to give me. Big head with all these compliments, Alina. Impossible. You're far too grounded for that. I was falling for my boss through text messages, and I had no idea how to stop it. Maya, do you have time for a quick strategy session? Alina appeared at my cubicle Thursday afternoon, her expression professionally neutral but something warmer flickering in her eyes. These strategy sessions had become routine over the past month. Alina would invite me to her corner office after. Most staff had left, ostensibly to discuss upcoming projects or review my progress. But the conversations rarely stayed focused on work for long. Her office reflected her sophisticated taste. Clean lines, carefully chosen art, a small bookshelf. Filled with marketing texts and literary fiction, I'd grown comfortable in the leather chair across from her desk, though I still felt a thrill every time she closed the door behind us. Tell me about the Richardson campaign concept, she said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea. First, how was your weekend? You mentioned exploring the museum district? This was how it always started, a work question followed by genuine interest in my personal life. Alina listened with complete attention as I described wandering through the Contemporary Art Museum. How I'd spent hours in front of a single painting trying to understand what the artist was attempting to communicate. That kind of patience with ambiguity is exactly what makes you good at this job, she said. Marketing is about sitting with uncertainty until patterns emerge. Is that what you did when you were starting out? Lena's expression grew thoughtful.
I was too impatient when I was your age, too eager to have all the answers. She paused,
studying my face. I wish I'd had your confidence to sit with, not knowing. I don't feel confident most of the time, I admitted. I feel like I'm constantly pretending to belong here. We all pretend sometimes. Lena leaned forward, her voice taking on that intimate quality that made me feel like we were sharing secrets. My marriage. I pretended it was working for years. Pretended I was happy with someone who saw me as an accessory to his successful life. It was the most she'd ever shared about her divorce, and I found myself leaning forward too, drawn into her confidence. He used to introduce me at parties as Alina, who runs marketing campaigns, she continued, her smile rueful, like I was a hobbyist. Never mind that I made more money than he did. He sounds like an ass, I said, then immediately regretted the bluntness. But Alina laughed, a genuine sound that filled her office with warmth. He was, though it took me embarrassingly long to realize it. She looked at me with something that felt like gratitude. You wouldn't tolerate that kind of dismissiveness. You know your own worth, do I? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Yes, Alina said firmly. Even when you doubt yourself, there's a core strength in you that's unmistakable. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The air in the office felt charged, heavy with something neither of us was naming. I was aware of every detail, the way the late afternoon light slanted through her windows, the faint scent of her perfume, how her dark eyes seemed to see right through my professional facade to something truer underneath. Sometimes I wonder, if I moved here for the right reasons, I found myself saying, if I'm running towards something, or just running away from feeling ordinary. There's nothing ordinary about you, Maya. Lena's voice was barely above a whisper. Trust me on that. The way she was looking at me made my breath catch. For a moment, I forgot this was my boss. Forgot about professional boundaries and appropriate behavior. There was only Alina, looking at me like I was something precious and rare. Then her desk phone rang, shattering the moment. Alina answered with professional efficiency, but I could see the flush in her cheeks, a slight tremor in her hands as she made notes. When she hung up, the spell was broken. We spent the remaining hour discussing actual work, campaign timelines, client expectations, budget considerations. But underneath the professional conversation, I could feel the undercurrent of something deeper, more dangerous, as I gathered my things to leave. Elena stood too, walking me to her office door. "Maya," she said, her hand on the doorknob. "Conversations, ... they mean a lot to me. I hope you know that." I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. "I haven't had someone to really talk to in a long time," she continued. "Thank you for listening." Walking back to my cubicle, I tried to process what was happening between us. Elena's vulnerability, the way she sought out my company, the intensity of our conversations, it felt like more than mentorship. But I was afraid to examine it too closely, afraid of what I might discover about my own feelings. "I have a proposition for you," Elena said, appearing at my desk Friday afternoon with an expression I couldn't quite read. "A work proposition?" I asked, though something in her tone suggested otherwise. "Sort of." She perched on the edge of my desk, a casual gesture that brought her closer than was strictly professional. "There's a gallery opening tomorrow night, contemporary artists, very trendy. I usually go to these networking events alone, but I thought, would you like to come as my plus one?" My heart did something complicated in my chest. "For networking?" "Exactly. Good opportunity for you to meet some of the creative directors from other agencies." Lena's explanation sounded perfectly reasonable. But there was something in her eyes that suggested this invitation meant more than professional development. "I'd love to," I said, trying to match her casual tone while internally panicking about what to wear to a trendy gallery opening. Saturday evening found me standing in front of my closet in complete despair. I'd tried on 6 different outfits, each one making me feel either too young, too conservative, or like I was trying too hard. Finally, I settled on a black dress. Simple, elegant. Borrowed from my roommate, paired with the one pair of heels I owned that didn't make me feel like I was walking on stilts. Elena had texted me the address, along with "can't wait to see you." They're followed by a smiley face that made me stare at my phone for a full minute. The gallery was in the Arts District. All exposed brick and industrial lighting filled with people who looked effortlessly sophisticated in ways I could only aspire to. I spotted Elena immediately. She was wearing a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her dark hair swept up in an elegant chignon that showed off her graceful neck. "Maya," she approached with a smile that made my nervous energy dissolve. "You look beautiful." The compliment, delivered with Elena's characteristic warmth, but something extra in her tone, made me flush with pleasure. "Thank you. You look." I gestured vaguely at her stunning appearance. "Incredible." Elena's smile widened and she touched my arm lightly. "Come on, let me show you around. There are some pieces I think you'll find fascinating." We moved through the gallery together, Lena's hand occasionally settling on my lower back to guide me through clusters of people. The casual intimacy of the gesture made me hyper-aware of every point of contact between us. "What do you think of this one?" Elena asked, stopping in front of a large abstract canvas that seemed to shift and move under the gallery lighting. I studied the piece, trying to articulate my response in a way that wouldn't reveal how much I was thinking about Elena's proximity. Rather than the art, it's unsettling, but in a way that makes you want to keep looking. "Exactly," Elena said, moving closer so our shoulders brushed. "The artist is exploring themes of transformation, the discomfort of becoming something new." A gallery staff member approached with champagne, addressing us as a unit. "Ladies, what brings you out tonight? Are you art collectors? Just admirers?" Elena replied smoothly. "We're always looking for pieces that speak to us." The staff member nodded enthusiastically. "Well, if you see anything you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to help. It's lovely to see couples who share a passion for contemporary art." Neither Elena nor I corrected the assumption that we were a couple. We simply smiled and accepted our champagne, moving on to the next piece as if nothing significant had happened. But I could feel the weight of that unacknowledged moment between us. "This artist uses color to explore emotional landscapes," Elena explained as we studied a series of paintings that seemed to pulse with feeling. "See how the blues and grays give way to these warm golds? It's like watching someone fall in love." She turned to look at me as she said it, and something in her expression made my breath catch. We were standing close enough that I could see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes. close enough that her perfume was making me dizzy. "Maya," she said softly, "you have such an intuitive understanding of visual storytelling. It's remarkable." The way she said remarkable with something like wonder in her voice made my heart race. This wasn't professional praise. This was something else entirely. We spent 2 hours at the gallery, moving from piece to piece, our conversation flowing seamlessly between art analysis and personal observations. Alina introduced me to several gallery owners and creative directors, always with genuine enthusiasm about my potential. But underneath the professional networking, I could feel the undercurrent of our growing connection. The way we seemed to orbit each other even in crowded spaces. Walking to the parking garage afterward, Alina was quiet, contemplative. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said as we reached my car. I really enjoyed your company. Thank you for inviting me. It was incredible." I turned to face her, and suddenly we were standing very close in the dim lighting of the garage. Alina stepped closer, her hand reaching up as if to touch my face, and for a moment, I thought something was going to happen. The air between us felt electric, charged with months of growing attraction and unspoken feelings. But then a car door slammed somewhere nearby, breaking the spell. Elena's hand dropped, and she stepped back, the moment dissolving into awkwardness. "I should go," she said quietly. "See you Monday." I watched her walk away, my heart pounding with the memory of how close we'd come to ... something. Whatever was building between us was approaching a point where we'd have to acknowledge it or step back, and I had no idea which option scared me more. "So what's the deal with you and Alina?" Jason asked Monday afternoon, his tone casual but curious. I nearly choked on my coffee. "What do you mean?" "Come on, Maya. She's been giving you special projects? Staying late to help with your presentations? Asking your opinion in meetings? ... Quotes Jason counted off on his fingers. "Either she's grooming you for a promotion or she's got a serious case of favoritism." "She's been a great mentor," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mentor, sure." Jason grinned. "But have you noticed how she lights up when she talks about your ideas? And last week when Marcus made that snide comment about your research methodology, I thought Alina was going to tear his head off. I had noticed Elena's fierce protection of my work, the way she consistently advocated for my contributions in team meetings. At the time, I'd been grateful. Now, Jason's observations made me wonder if others had noticed Elena's attention too. "You're imagining things," I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "Maybe, but you're definitely her protege." Now, Alina doesn't usually take such a personal interest in junior staff development. Jason's expression was friendly, teasing, completely innocent of any deeper implication. The word protege sat uncomfortably with me. It suggested a professional relationship, but lately, my interactions with Alina felt like anything but professional. The late-night text conversations, the intimate discussions in her office, the way she'd looked at me at the gallery opening, none of it felt like typical mentorship. "Is that ... a problem?" I asked. "Are you kidding? It's great for your career." Elena's approval carries serious weight around here. Jason paused, studying my expression. "You seem worried about it, though." "Why?" "Because I'm falling for her," I thought. "Because every conversation feels like foreplay, and I don't know how to stop wanting more. I just don't want anyone to think I'm getting special treatment," I said instead. "Maya, you're talented. Alina recognizes that. Don't overthink it." Jason returned to his work, apparently satisfied with the explanation, but his observations lingered with me for the rest of the week. Was I taking advantage of Elena's attention? Was she showing favoritism that could damage my professional reputation? Or worse, was Alina taking advantage of her position as my supervisor? The questions made me uncomfortable because they forced me to examine something I'd been avoiding. The power dynamic between us was real and complicated. Alina was my boss, 10 years older, with the ability to influence my career trajectory. If something did develop between us, would it be because of genuine mutual attraction, or because the imbalance of power made it difficult for me to say no? But then, Alina would text me about a book recommendation or stop by my desk with my favorite coffee, and all my rational concerns would dissolve in the warmth of her attention. I was walking a tightrope. between professional advancement and personal desire, and I wasn't sure which side I hoped to fall on. Thursday morning brought the kind of sudden downpour that transforms a pleasant walk into a survival exercise. I'd checked the weather before leaving my apartment, seen partly cloudy skies, and decided an umbrella was unnecessary. By the time I reached the office building, I was soaked through, hair plastered to my head, cardigan dripping, shoes squelching with each step. I tried to slip into the office unnoticed, hoping to reach the bathroom and attempt some damage control before anyone saw me. But Alina was coming out of the elevator as I was hurrying toward the ladies' room. "Maya." Her voice was filled with concern. "You're completely drenched." "Just a little wet," I said, though water was literally dripping from my hair onto the polished floor. "You're going to catch pneumonia. Come on." Alina placed her hand on my back, guiding me toward her office with gentle firmness. "Alina, I'm dripping water everywhere. Should just go to the bathroom and nonsense." She ushered me into her office and closed the door behind us. "Sit down. I'll get you some towels." I perched awkwardly on the edge of her guest chair, trying not to soak the expensive leather. Lena disappeared into her private bathroom, returning with several fluffy towels and a concerned expression. "Here," she said, draping one towel around my shoulders like a blanket. "You're shivering." I hadn't realized I was cold until she mentioned it. But now I could feel the office air conditioning raising goosebumps on my wet skin. Lena noticed my discomfort and immediately shrugged out of her blazer. "Put this on," she insisted, holding out the jacket. "It's dry and warm. I can't take your blazer." "What will you wear?" "I have another jacket in my closet." "Maya, you're freezing. Just put it on." I slipped into Elena's blazer, immediately enveloped by the scent of her perfume and the warmth her body had left in the fabric. The intimate gesture, wearing something that had been against her skin, made my pulse quicken despite the chill. "Your hair is soaked," Elena observed, moving closer with another towel. "May I?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Elena stepped behind my chair, gently gathering my wet hair in the towel and squeezing out the excess water. Her touch was careful, almost tender, and I found myself leaning into the attention. "You have such beautiful hair," she murmured, her fingers working through the damp strands. "It's so soft." The compliment, delivered in Elena's low voice while her hands moved through my hair, made something flutter deep in my stomach. This level of physical care went far beyond professional concern, and we both knew it. "Better?" Lena asked, moving to face me again. But she didn't step back. Instead, she remained close, studying my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Much better," I whispered. Elena's hand came up to brush a strand of damp hair away from my face, her fingers lingering against my cheek. "You're going to catch a cold," she said softly. But she didn't move away. We were frozen in that moment, Elena's hand warm against my face, her dark eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I was ready to acknowledge. The air between us felt charged, electric with possibility and danger. "Lena," I started, not knowing what I planned to say. Her thumb brushed across my cheekbone, feather-light touch that made my eyes flutter closed. I could feel her moving closer, could smell her perfume mixing with the clean scent of rain on skin. Then someone knocked on the office door. We sprang apart like teenagers caught by parents, Lena's hand dropping from my face as she stepped back. Quickly, my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it was audible. "Come in," Alina called, her voice slightly breathless. Jason poked his head around the door, his cheerful expression faltering slightly as he took in the scene, me wrapped in Slade. Towels and Elena's blazer, Elena standing too far away with flushed cheeks. "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. ... Jason's eyes flicked between us with curiosity. "Maya, you look like you got caught in that downpour." Completely soaked, I managed, trying to sound normal. Lena was just helping me get dried off. That's nice of her. Jason's tone was neutral, but I could see questions in his expression. "I'll catch up with you later, Maya." "Alina, the Morrison clients are here for the 10 o'clock meeting." "Of course. Thank you, Jason." Lena's professional composure had returned, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. After Jason left, Elena and I stood in awkward silence. The intimate moment we'd almost shared felt enormous in the quiet office, impossible to ignore or pretend hadn't happened. "I should get ready for that meeting," Elena said finally, not quite meeting my eyes. Of course. I started to shrug out. Of her blazer, but she stopped me. Keep it for now, till your clothes dry. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. Maya, what just happened? I know, I said quickly, sparing us both the awkwardness of trying to name it. I know. Alina nodded, relief and something else flickering across her face. We should be more careful. Yes, I agreed, though the word felt like a lie. I didn't want to be more careful, wanted to know what would have happened. If Jason hadn't knocked, I spent the rest of the morning wearing Elena's blazer. Hyper-aware of how it smelled like her, how the sleeves were too long for my arms, how it felt like being wrapped in her embrace. Every time I caught a glimpse of myself in a window reflection, I was reminded of how close we'd come to crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But more than that, I was forced to confront the truth I'd been avoiding. I wanted to cross that line. Whatever was building between Alina and me, whatever complicated feelings we were dancing around, I wanted to stop pretending they didn't exist. The question was whether Alina wanted the same thing, whether we were both brave enough to find. Out it happened during the Hartwell Industries presentation, 3 weeks after the rainy Thursday incident. I was halfway through explaining our proposed social media strategy when I completely lost my train of thought. It's not just a momentary pause, a complete mental blank that stretched into awkward silence while 6 senior executives stared at me. Expectantly, I fumbled with my notes, my mind utterly empty. The engagement metrics show ... But I couldn't remember what the metrics showed. I couldn't remember anything except the way Alina had touched my face, the sound of her voice whispering about catching cold. The weight of possibility in that moment before Jason knocked. Alina smoothly stepped in from her position at the back of the conference room. What Maya is highlighting, she said with professional grace, is how our data-driven approach to audience segmentation can increase engagement by up to 40% in the first quarter. She moved to the front of the room, taking control of the presentation with the kind of seamless confidence that made her so respected in the industry. I stood there feeling completely exposed, my face burning with embarrassment as she covered for my spectacular failure. After the clients left, pressed by Elena's recovery strategy and apparently willing to overlook my meltdown, the conference room emptied except for the 2 of us. Maya, Elena's voice was gentle but serious. My office. Please. I followed her down the hallway, my stomach churning with dread. I'd blown the biggest presentation of my career, and Alina had been forced to save me in front of important clients. There was no explanation that didn't sound like professional incompetence. Alina closed her office door and turned to face me, her expression unreadable. What happened in there? I'm sorry, I said immediately. I completely blanked. I know the material backwards and forwards, but I just ... I couldn't focus. Maya, you've been distracted for weeks, missing deadlines, making small mistakes, and now this. Elena's tone was professional. I could hear something else underneath, concern that felt too personal for a typical supervisor conversation. Talk to me. What's going on? The question broke something open in my chest. I'd been holding everything. And for so long, the sleepless nights thinking about Alina, the way I analyzed every text message for hidden meaning, the constant awareness of her presence in the office that made it impossible to concentrate on anything else. I can't. I started, then stopped, pressing my palms against my eyes. God, Alina, I can't concentrate on anything because I think about you constantly. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, raw and honest and completely inappropriate. Think about our conversations, about the way you look at me sometimes, about what might have happened if Jason hadn't knocked on your door. I looked up at her then, seeing my own vulnerability reflected in her shocked expression. I'm falling for you, and it's destroying my ability to function professionally. Alina was very still, her face cycling through surprise, concern, and something that looked like pain. Maya ... I know it's inappropriate, I continued, unable to stop now that I'd started. I know you're my boss, and this is completely unprofessional, and probably makes you uncomfortable. But I can't pretend anymore that these feelings don't exist. You think this makes me uncomfortable? Lena's voice was quiet, careful. Doesn't it? Alina moved closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. Maya, you don't make me uncomfortable. You make me terrified. Terrified of what? How much I want to cross every line I've drawn for myself. Elena's composure was cracking, revealing something raw underneath. How much I look forward to your texts. How I find excuses to work late hoping you'll still be here. Of how I catch myself staring at you during meetings and wondering what it would feel like, too. She trailed off, shaking her head. This can't happen. Why? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. Because I'm your supervisor. You're 24 and I'm 34. Because if this goes wrong, it could destroy your career. Lena's voice was strained. Because I care about you too much to risk hurting you. You think you'd hurt me? I asked, stepping closer despite her attempts to maintain distance. I don't know. Lena's professional mask was completely gone now, replaced by uncertainty that made her seem younger, more vulnerable. I haven't felt like this about anyone and maybe ever. That scares me. The admission hung between us, honest and fragile. I could see Elena fighting her own feelings, trying to be responsible, trying to protect both of us from the complications this would create. I've been married, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I understood attraction, connection, love, but with you. She looked at me with something like wonder. You make me feel like I've been sleepwalking for years. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to stay still, to let Elena find her own words. I tell myself it's just mentorship, just professional interest in your development. But then you smile at something I've said, or text me about a book recommendation, or look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Elena's breath caught, and I know I'm lying to myself. Elena, I said her name like a prayer. You've become the brightest part of my days, she whispered, the words coming out like a confession. I know I'm not supposed to say that. I know. It's unprofessional and inappropriate, and could complicate everything for both of us. I stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to smell her familiar perfume. But I'm glad you did. Lena's eyes closed, briefly, as if she was in pain. Maya, if we do this, everything changes. Can't take it back. I don't want to take it back, I said firmly. I want to stop pretending that what I feel for you is just professional admiration. I want to stop analyzing every conversation for hidden meaning because the meaning isn't hidden anymore. This is so complicated, Elena breathed. Maybe, I said, reaching up to touch her face the way she'd touched mine that rainy Thursday. But maybe some things are worth complicating. Elena's eyes fluttered closed at my touch, and I could feel the last of her resistance crumbling. Maya, she whispered, my name sounding like surrender. I'm here, I said softly. I'm right here. She opened her eyes then, looking at me with such intensity that my breath caught. I've wanted this for so long, then stop fighting it. Elena's hand came up to cover mine where it rested against her cheek. For a moment, we stood like that, suspended between decision and action, between what we should do and what we wanted to do. Then Elena leaned forward, closing the distance between us with careful deliberation. Our lips met softly, tentatively, a question more than a statement. But when I kissed her back, when my free hand found the nape of her neck and drew her closer, the hesitation dissolved into months of built-up longing. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected. It's tender but desperate, familiar despite being our first, like coming home to a place I'd never been. Elena's lips were soft against mine, her breath warm, her body trembling slightly as I pulled her closer. When we finally broke apart, we remained close, foreheads touching, breathing unsteady. This complicates everything, Elena whispered, but her hands were still tangled in my hair. Maybe some things are worth complicating, I repeated, my voice hoarse with emotion. Elena smiled then, the first genuine, unguarded smile I'd seen from her since this all began. You're going to be the death of me, Maya Chen. I hope not, I said, pressing a soft kiss to the corner of her mouth. I have plans for us. We spent the next hour in Elena's office, talking about what this meant, what we wanted, what we were both afraid of. Elena sat in her desk chair while I perched on the edge of her desk, close enough to touch, but not quite touching, both of us hyper-aware of the new dynamic between us. "We need to be careful at work," Alina said, though her eyes kept drifting to my lips. "Professional boundaries, at least in public." "I can do professional," I said, then smiled. "In public." Alina laughed, a sound full of relief and possibility. "You're going to make this very difficult for me." "Good," I said, reaching out to straighten her slightly mussed hair. "I like making things difficult for you, Maya." Alina caught my hand, bringing it to her lips to press a soft kiss against my palm. "I need you to understand something. It's us. It's not a game to me. If we do this, I want it to mean something." "It already means something," I said seriously. "It's meant something for months." Alina nodded, her grip on my hand tightening slightly. "I worry about the power dynamic, about your career. If people think you're getting ahead because of personal relationships—" "Let me worry about my career," I interrupted gently. "Alina, I'm an adult. I can make my own choices about what risks are worth taking, and this is worth it. Secrecy, the complications, the potential professional fallout." I slid off the desk, moving to stand between her legs, close enough that she had to look up at me. "You're worth it," I said simply. Whatever this becomes is worth it." Alina's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight. "With affection, when did you get so wise?" "Someone very smart taught me that the best strategies require taking calculated risks." "Calculated risks," Alina repeated, her hands settling on my hips. "Is that what I am?" "No," I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You're not a risk at all. You're the safest thing I've ever felt." It's when I finally left Elena's office. That evening, everything had changed. We'd crossed the line we'd been dancing around for months, and there was no going back. But as I walked to my car, Elena's kiss still warm on my lips, I realized I didn't want to go back. For the first time in months, my mind was completely clear. Not because the feelings were gone, but because I'd finally stopped fighting them. Alina and I had acknowledged what was between us, and now we could figure out what came next. The secret. Touches would be different now, not accidental moments of connection, but deliberate intimacy. The meaningful glances would carry new weight, loaded with shared knowledge and mutual desire. The guilt would remain, maybe even intensify. But it would be balanced by something I'd never experienced before. The thrill of being chosen by someone I admired completely. Alina had whispered that I'd become the brightest part of her days. As I drove home through the city lights, I realized she'd become something even more significant to me. She'd become my future. Complicated and uncertain and absolutely worth fighting for.